Good morning, guys. Many thanks for those who interacted and asked questions concerning the first recorded lecture. And I encourage every student not to hesitate to ask questions, if any, to illustrate the points explained in the second recorded lecture. Today we will continue explaining further points in Unit 2. All the performative sentences or utterances which we covered on page 52 share common grammatical features, namely 1. Subject, 2. Main verb. The first one, the subject. In terms of the subject, all the utterances start with the subject pronoun I. If we use another subject pronoun, then an utterance changes into a consecutive one, which in turn wouldn't perform an action. For further illustration, take examples 11 and 12 on page 57. Example 11. A. I bequeath all my property to my niece, which means that someone leaves his property or something to someone. Now, no one else can do so. But in B, he bequeaths all his property to his niece. This kind of sentence will be odd, inappropriate. Doesn't make sense. If we said C, he bequeathed all his property to his niece, that means that it's only a sentence or an utterance to inform, to describe, to say, but not to perform. Example 12. I sentence you to 5 years imprisonment. A person who would say this kind of utterance would be a judge. Look at B. Judge Huxley sentences you to 5 years imprisonment. It's inappropriate. Sentence C. Judge Huxley sentenced you to 5 years imprisonment. Now, it's only describing, it's only saying. And this kind of verdict is in absentia, for instance. When we say absentia, like the person who was charged with the crime and the punishment was absent. The second feature is main verb. All examples on page 52 are simple present and active voice. Example 12 on page 58. A. I named this ship the Armada is appropriate because B. I'm naming this ship the Armada, and C. This ship would or will be named by me the Armada seem odd if they are uttered. The third feature is insertion of hereby, which means as a result of this utterance. Hereby can be inserted immediately after the subject to sound more formal. For example, example 13. Example A. I hereby name this ship the Armada. B. I hereby pronounce you husband and wife. Now, performative can be found in the passive voice. For example, you are hereby authorized to pay. Now, some utterances have the power of performing acts. They somehow don't include the subject or the verb or both. For example 14, page 58, guilty, which is uttered by the foreman of a jury. Notice that hereby cannot occur with the word guilty because the word guilty only comes after the subject immediately, and in guilty alone we don't have the subject I. From the previous example, we can conclude that there is no conventional way to utter performatives. Austin, for example, says that there are two forms of performative utterances: one, explicit, and two, primary or implicit. The first form of Austin's taxonomy would be explicit performative utterances, which have the following structure: subject plus verb plus that plus X. Now X is the proposed utterance. For example, I, that's a subject. Promise, that's a verb. That is that. And then we need X, which will be I will give a speech in the conference. The whole utterance as a whole, I promise that I will give a speech in the conference. The second form is primary performative utterances, which lack the three items: subject plus verb plus that, but uses X, which is the proposed utterance. For example, I will give a speech in the conference. This form can be interpreted differently to mean someone is willing to give a speech or promising to give a speech. Other examples can be the utterance out. It may mean I declare you out, or I pronounce you out, or I call you out. Another example can be guilty, which can be interpreted to mean I find you guilty, I pronounce you guilty, or I deem you guilty. To conclude, Austin highlights He further emphasizes that explicit performative utterances are the most satisfying mark to identify performative utterances. The advantage of the explicit performative utterance is that they or it makes the meaning of the utterance clear. Now, I want you to answer exercise 4 on page 61 after you pause the video now and then continue with the recorded video. After answering the question, we can conclude that even the explicit performative formula, which is subject plus verb plus that plus X, might not be performative utterance. It is only a constitutive when referring to a habitual action. Example 22 on page 61 is another example. Now look at the table in front of you, which is adopted from Austin and contains three sets of utterances, which are explicit performatives, doubtful performatives, and constitutives. Now, explicit performatives, if they're explicit, it means that it is clear that they perform. The constitutives, it is clear that the utterances do not perform. But the one in the middle is doubtful. It can be interpreted into two interpretations, performative and constitutive. Hence, Austin devised 4 tests to decide whether doubtful utterances are performative or constitutive. The first test is, do words constitute the performing of an act using did he really? For example, the doubtful utterance, I welcome you. Did he really welcome him? The second test, can an action be performed without the utterance of the word? For example, I am sorry and I repent. I'm sorry is in doubtful and I repent is in constitutive. Now, one can be these. One can be sorry. One can repent. But one cannot apologize without the utterance of the words I apologize. The third test, can the agent take full control of the action, like the person who speaks or utter? One can be willing to apologize or not to someone, but one cannot be willing to be sorry because it is an inner feeling. The fourth test, can the utterance be literally false? That is true validity. For example, I'm sorry. Is he really sorry? Is he telling the truth? Another example, I apologize. The act of apologizing here has taken place, and hence it is a performative utterance. Now, you are required to apply these tests on the utterances in question 5 on page 66 and decide whether the utterances are performatives or constitutives. Thank you for watching, and I bid welcome your questions. Have a nice day.